Привет всем! This is Natalia Derkach, and I'm excited to be a part of Humans of Telecom.
Hey everyone, a very warm welcome to Humans of Telecom, the Unplugged podcast. This is your host Anurag Aggarwal. As you all know, this is where we go beyond platforms and pipelines to uncover the people behind telecom, the leaders who balance technology, business, and human connection. And today's guest is one of those rare professionals who blends strong commercial impact with a deeply human approach. With over 15 years of international experience across telecom, IT, cloud, and CPaaS, she has built and scaled carrier relationships and partner ecosystems across multiple geographies, including Europe, the CIS region, Africa, and also Asia. Her journey spans telecom operators, system integrators, and cloud-driven businesses, working closely with mobile network operators, aggregators, and enterprise clients. But what makes her story especially compelling is the human layer behind the professional success. Having lived and worked across multiple countries, including 7 formative years in South Korea, she developed a deep respect for cultural nuance, communication styles, and the people behind every route, deal, and SLA. She believes technology should serve people and that sustainable growth is built on empathy, clarity, and long-term relationships, themes we'll be unpacking in today's conversation. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Natalia Derkach, Director of Carrier Relations and Sales at Nuetech Stack. Natalia, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this journey. We'd love to hear more about you. Which part of the world do you belong to? And from where are you joining this podcast today?
Well, thank you for introduction. And originally I'm from Siberia. I was born in the capital of Siberia, Novosibirsk, and now I'm in Moscow, talking to you and living here as well.
Wonderful, Natalia. It's good to have yet another Russian guest on our show today. I think there has been a flurry of guests from Russia in the past 10 to 15 episodes. And I know that you and I had been trying to work out a recording as well for a while. And I'm glad that we could finally do it. So thank you so much. And let's start by understanding more about your journey. Tell us more about Natalia. How did you get into the world of telecom? Was it by chance? Was it planned? And how's the journey been so far?
Well, it was all by accident, like all in my life. So accidentally, I was invited to a company and started to work in telco without knowing anything about it. And that's how I just started like 15 years ago. I was working like a simple manager, was going by my feet to every business center and seducing clients to work with this company.
Interesting. And how's the entire journey been for you? So you said you got into the world of telecom accidentally. So how have you been finding this telecom fraternity and how did you get into the CPaaS space especially?
Well, in CPaaS, I just got recently like with Nuetech. But if we are talking in telecom in general, like I was working in fixed mobile coverage, I was working in fixed layer 1, layer 2, and I was working with clouds. So my telco journey is very broad with broad experience, but all is true about telco.
All right. And within this journey of yours, Natalia, have there been any major memorable or impactful moments that you can share with us?
Well, there is one that make everything upside down for me in telecom. I was working in one company in Russia and I understood that there is no international department at all. So my English level was good by that time. And this was my chance to become someone, to become someone in this company, to become like someone is known in telco society. So I went to my principals and asked like, if I will go for international department, can we open that? And they told me like, well, you can try, but first of all, you have to bring us a first contract to open the department. And this was my first time when I started to work with LinkedIn. It was like 12, 13 years ago, maybe. My first post was in there. That's how I started to look for companies, like the big companies who can give us the layer in some international country, like, for example, in Cyprus or Netherlands. So we have to put L2 channel from Russia to Netherlands. months, for example. So that's how I started to look. And our prices were cheaper because by that time, only Telecom could make such channels. But when I started to work with that, when I started to get know the companies, people in person through LinkedIn only, no capacities, nothing. So just LinkedIn, and it started to work. It was the biggest margin business by that time and in my life actually as well.
Interesting. Sometimes we take this international relation for granted, and then we come across stories such as yours, where people getting exposed to the international side of business and people around us are picking up a lot more of it. And we hear interesting stories on that. And especially LinkedIn, something again, which is a tool we take for granted. It's interesting to see that over a decade ago, how your experience has been with this application. All right. And now moving on from the telecom side to a bit more on the human side. So, first in Natalia, is there something surprising or shocking that many of us in the industry don't know about you?
Yeah, I can predict a future.
Okay, let's hear a bit more about that. What futures have you predicted in the past? Mm.
Well, you know that my major is Oriental Studies, and I was studying a lot about Idzin or some other science, the ancient science. And I went to runes. This is these some symbols that you are putting in a row, like with asking some questions, like tarot. Maybe you know tarot, right? So runes are like tarots. So you're asking a question, and you can actually get an answer with those symbols if you can read them. So that's how you can predict a future with a question.
Interesting. And how has the experience been so far? Have you managed to put in some right predictions?
Well, actually, I had the same recording for Russian channel of Telecom. We do have the same things in Russia, only in Russia. So, and they were asking me to do a podcast with runes. So the big companies were asking me questions, and I was doing the answers only with using these assets with me. And 90% was correct.
Cool. So I guess somewhere at some level you did predict that this podcast is also going to take place. So cool.
For sure.
All right. And beyond predicting the future, Natalia, what else do you do to recharge yourself? What are your passions like?
Well, my passion are animals. You know, sometimes I do volunteering in some pet care centers. And recently I did adopt a cat. I was writing it in LinkedIn. His owner died, and people want to murder him. So I could not allow that. So this cat right now is living with me. And yes, I'm doing also yoga. You know, when you're calming down yourself, when you're calming down your soul, it's making you feel the life, actually, not moving that fast like we are usually doing. So yoga, pets, my cat, meditation, all what I need. And also, I do need sometimes to change a picture. So the travel is a must for me. So I need to see some new cultures, some new people. That's why I choose such a job, because you need to travel.
Yes, for sure. I can understand that this industry that we are in is a very fascinating one and gives us a chance to thankfully see more of the world. All right.
Exactly.
So, animals, traveling, and yoga, fitness, and meditation. Interesting. And moving on from that, Natalia, we will now be playing a very interesting game. So, two truths and a lie. You need to share three interesting statements about yourself, and they could be any fact or incident about your life. And I have to try and guess which one of them are true and which one of them is a lie. So, do you have three such statements for us today?
Yes, I can give you some three. First one is I did work as hairdresser. Second one is I did work as a model. And third one, I did work as a waiter.
Okay, that's a very interesting one, I must say. Very fascinating. So, hairdresser, model, and waitress.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for sure, I have seen you in person and I see how well turned out you are and how well you carry yourself. So, I am going to take a chance here. I'd love to hear that all three are true and you have some interesting story about each of them. But just for the sake of this question, I'm going to say that, okay, possibly you worked as a hairdresser. Possibly you have worked as a model, you've been a model, and possibly you have not been a waitress. So, am I right out here?
Yes, you're right.
Ah, okay. I was hoping there'll be an interesting waitress story also, where at some time in your career, say while you're studying, you've been a waitress and you've served some fancy guests wherever you were working. But still, it's very interesting. So, how has that experience been for you, being a hairdresser and being a model? And what made you get into that world and what made you get out of it?
Well, as long as most of my friends were working the same time when I was working those two jobs, they were working like a waitress. I choose myself to work both in the same time, like a hairdresser and as a model. So when I was a model, I was doing a defile in a scene, right? So, and I had a very high heels. It was slippery, very slippery, and it's like fall down, like in front of everyone. Like many people was watching me, and I was feeling like so bad and everything. Then I went, like, I woke up, I did my job. When I was under the sun, I was crying because, like to fall, it is not so good when so many eyes are watching you. And then my supervisor showed me the most famous model, and she was falling in a sun as well. So and nothing happened. It's okay. You are still human. And also, when I was working like a hairdresser, I did a practice. So I was cutting a man, and then I've heard like something like, "Oi," and I didn't understand what's going on, like how I was doing. And then blood came up. So I cut his ear recently. So
Okay, these are some very interesting stories. And how did that pan out? Were you able to find your way through that eventually?
in ear we have a lot of capillaries, so you just needed to get something for disinfection, and the blood will disappear. Nothing happened so like much, but still, it was a practice. So like people are coming there when they do not have much money, so they have to understand that we are still in practice. So we are not professional hairdressers yet. So this was okay.
All right. But interesting stories for sure. And I think the story about being a model and falling and then still managing your way through, I think that's such an important lesson in life, that it doesn't matter if you fall down. What matters is that you get up again and you keep the show running. So I think that's a very interesting concept you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And within this fascinating life of yours, of having been a hairdresser, a model, possibly you could have also been a waitress like your friends, and been in the world of telecom for over 15 years. If there is one thing you could change about your life, possibly, what would that one thing be?
Well, I would never leave Korea. I would stay in there. But honestly, I wouldn't like to change anything. As everything that was in my life, it made me who I am. It made me stronger. It made me a person who understands cultures, who understand human, who understand animals. If we would go back and change something, we will be changed in the future. So we won't be the same person with the same lessons. That's why I would not like to change anything.
All right. So basically, we're a function of all our experiences we've had in life, and we wouldn't like to change everything. Fair enough. All right. And Natalia, while we're having a very interesting conversation, we are down to our final question, our sign off section. What does being human mean to you? What sort of a human being would you want the world to remember you as?
Well, for me, it's something about balance. It's balancing a straight with empathy. When you are someone who is building a system and achieving results without losing sensitivity and integrity. So what I mean in here, when you are honest to yourself, to the people around, to the life in general, when you are finding your truth, like people will follow you, companies will follow you. And company, it's not about the big enterprises. Still, big enterprises are about people, and they will follow you no matter on which company you belong to. So as an example, I had many companies in my previous job, like United Capital Partners, biggest Russian agriculture company, like Tork Telecom. And in each company where I was working, they was working with me no matter what kind of business I'm serving. So this is about humans. So that's how I want to be. That's how I want people to remember me, as someone who connected what business and humanity, logic and intuition, maybe like this, like I hope this is enough.
No, that's perfect, Natalia. I think that's a fantastic thought. And yes, connecting business and humans, finally, all the business around us is being run by humans. And that human connection is what keeps us going. And I think that's what's the central theme of this podcast as well. So while you and I have interacted as business partners, but it's always interesting to connect at another level and learn so many more interesting facets about the human beings we interact with, such as somebody who has been a hairdresser and has even nearly cut off somebody's ear. So, yes, I think you are living a life of bringing humanity into business and living a life of integrity, as you mentioned. So, beautiful thoughts to end this conversation on, Natalia. And thank you so much for your time. It's so wonderful to have had you here on the show today.
Thank you for the invitation, and it was nice to chat with you in here.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Natalia. And as always, to our wonderful listeners here, thanks a lot for tuning into the show. We hope this episode gave you a good glimpse of the human side of Natalia Derkach, someone who accidentally stepped into the world of telecom 15 years ago and never looked back. A sharp mind with an uncanny ability to predict what's coming next, always a few steps ahead of the curve. A free spirit who's deeply passionate about animals, travel, and the calming balance of yoga and meditation. And finally, someone who has a life full of fascinating twists, including chapters as being a hairdresser and even a model before finding a true calling. That for us is Natalia Derkach. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, do stay tuned in because we shall soon be releasing yet another episode and another compelling story from the telecom space. And do follow the podcast on your preferred streaming channel. On behalf of Humans of Telecom, this is your host Anurag Aggarwal signing off for now. Take care.